what WHO has done. That is the first step in probably the wrong direction. With this, we'll be missing cases that present in the hospital. How many people can have access to the investigation? It's too expensive. We're talking of 40 to 55,000 naira. You can check it out. That's expensive in a country where the minimum wage is 18,000 naira. Who's going to go out there and spend 40,000 naira on COVID-19? Except someone who's desperate to either leave the country or someone who has the means and knows that, oh, health is wealth. So how many Nigerians will fall to the category? Very minimal. So we are doing less screening compared to what other nations are doing. Then two, what are we doing about hygiene? In Japan, they've been into hand wash and use of face masks for years, since the time of the Hiroshima bombing. They decided to go about their hygiene in the proper direction. Are we doing likewise? Just take a peep through your window and look at the street. Count 10 people walking. Are they on face masks? You'll be so shocked. In highly congested areas, like, let me not mention areas, you are going to be sure in suburbs that out of 10, only one will wear a face mask. And if using it rightly, definitely I can guarantee you that it's a no. That is true. Countries like New Zealand, just like you have mentioned, have done well. They've been able to reach out to the populace. They've been able to enlighten them. Are we doing that? Yes, we are doing that. But is it enough? I'll say no. How can we step this up? Children have resumed school today. I'm looking outside here now, and I've seen more than 50 kids. No one is being protected.
Dr. Olajide.
They are going to school without it. Maybe they kept their face mask in their bag.
Dr.
How are we
Olajide.
going to ensure that is done? Hand wash, as simple as it is. They are available in schools because I know the criteria for schools to open.
Dr. Olajide, let me interject and ask you this quickly. You talked about the lack of adherence to some of these protocols. The prominent thing, I was in Owerri recently, and I was shocked to see that nobody, absolutely nobody, was putting on a face mask. And somebody saw me with face mask and said, why am I deceiving myself? There is no COVID-19. And I'm not talking about someone who is uneducated. I'm talking about people that are highly educated. So is it more a question of inadequate publicity, or the fact that aside the fatigue of the prolonged period of the pandemic and the disbelief that is being perpetrated is more to blame for this lack of adherence to protocols that have been put in for our safety? That's the one part of the question. When you're done with it, I have another part.
Thank you very much. You're giving me a double-barrel approach. You're right with all what you said. What we call different strokes for different folks. If you ask 1,000 people, many will tell you COVID-19 is a scam. People have made money from it. Look at the palliatives that were kept somewhere. Hunger, and people went there, packed everything. They still believe it was something formulated by the government to siphon funds. So how can you now tell them that, no, it is real? Because they found bags of rice, sacks of food somewhere that runs into billions of naira. It's hard to convince such people. Two, look at our healthcare facilities. They are still overwhelmed. Is the protocol still in line? Yes. But are people adhering to such? No. I mean, we don't even need people to adhere. We need them to comply. Because there are two different stages: adherence and compliance. With adherence, you are forcing them. But with compliance, they understand. They know the implication. They are aware. So they take ownership. They take responsibility of their actions, of their activities. Such a person will ensure that the face mask is in the vehicle. I have like 10 face masks, despite the fact that I don't need it. But look at you, you're in the office now. You're not on face mask. Are you?
No, because we are in a studio, in a confined space, and we're both negative, and there is a bit of a social distance between us.
It's interesting wearing a face mask on screen this morning.
That's very reasonable. I understand that. That's very reasonable. But people look at you outside will not understand that. You understand? They are seeing you on TV on there, and they're like, you're not on face mask. They don't know what the 1 meter distance is all about.
All
You
right,
know what? 15 minutes of
Doctor.
contact with someone who's probable, like a probable case or a confirmed case. What
Yeah,
likely?
Dr. Ayodeji, so hold on. I want us to now bring in, we'll come back to you, Dr. Ayodeji. We're going to go now to Dr. Tunde Balogun, who's also just stepped in. Good morning and welcome, Dr. Balogun. Can you hear us, sir?
Yes, I can. Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thanks for
hear
joining
you.
us.
Welcome.
So I want to bring in one of the statements Dr. Olajide had already said. He said, COVID is here to stay. Do you think from, the way that we've also set up our COVID-19 fight, for Nigeria, with the people and their level of awareness, with the investment in the health sector generally, do you think, that we should be worried, seeing also that the moves that are being made across the world to find a vaccine haven't produced anything yet? Should Nigerians be worried?
There is a strong ground for worry in Nigeria. The reasons are obvious. Health communication and information is the most difficult aspect of communication globally. So, and the reason is because practitioners are training to understand behaviors of human behaviors is not deep enough, and therefore to communicate persuasively for people to
I
make the
think
right choices is not easy because you are trying to compare their cultural way of life.
Dr. Balogun, Dr. Balogun, please, we will come back to
Hear
you.
me?
The audio is not so good at the moment. I'm sure some persons are straining to hear what you're saying. We'll come back to you in a bit. We'll come back to Dr. Olajide. The second part of my question has to do with the concerns raised by the minister about the disruption caused by the End SARS protest. We do know that during that period there was an absolute lack of recognition that we had COVID-19 still. You also alluded to the fact that we might not be doing adequate testing. This is not the position that's being held by the NCDC. They say that in spite of increased testing, we have a lesser figure. Where is the place of the earlier assumption that the weather in this country might play a role in reducing the number of infections we have? And what do we do to increase the number of testing, especially with the concerns of costing that you alluded to earlier?
Thank you for the question. These are multiple questions. You've gone through A, B, C, D for me. All right.
I'm sorry, just do what you can with it.
Okay, I'll try as much as possible to be simple. Now, the NSAS saga had brought down the light in our hearts. If you notice, we all came together, something united us, and for all the souls lost, it's painful, but let's get back to business. It would have taken just one person with COVID-19 to be in that crowd to have spread to 1,000. Now imagine those thousands going home to their loved ones, and they have at least 3 to 4 people at home, that's 2, and they're still encountering or bringing up low figures. Ask the question, who are they training? Have they gone to the suburbs, to the highly congested areas to screen people? And what methods are they using? If you look at what they are using, you need to check the sensitivity and the specificity of the test reagent. How positive you can get, those are positive. And those that are not positive, how are you going to be sure they're not positive? So those are the questions there. 3, how can they improve the screening process? As simple as it is, screening is supposed to pick people out, not to diagnose. Government has gone through the hard way, which they believe is the only way, by going ahead to try and diagnose, which is expensive. They resulted in making it expensive and people cannot afford it. What do I mean by that? The mode of investigation without a cumbersome, they have loads of investigations to do. The machines to use are way too more expensive. That's why the resultant effect is that people have to pay hard-earned money to get the test done. And look at the timeline. It's about 5 days. Who does that in this time and age? You do tests on the spot, you get the result in the next 4 or 5 hours, and you are on the move. 5 days of your life will be on hold. And that's terrible enough. Do you know the amount of manpower loss that could have occurred within that 4 or 5 days?
Dr. Olajide, we're going to, of course, put you on pause there to quickly bring in Dr. Tunde Balogun once again. We had lost him earlier. Dr. Tunde, welcome back.
Thank you. I think it's better now.
I think, yes, we can hear you clearly now. I was asking earlier about, reasons, well, I think we've lost him again. Are you still there, sir?
No, I'm here.
Okay, yeah, brilliant. So I was asking earlier about what it looks like. If Dr. Olajide earlier mentioned that COVID-19 is not going away, it's here to stay. Should we be worried in Nigeria, seeing that there is no current, vaccine for COVID-19? And second, what are your thoughts on what we should have learned from the year 2020 moving into our health budget for 2021? Does it seem like we've learned anything and we've made better investments in healthcare moving forward?
Thank you so much. I stated earlier that the basis for worry is still very much with us because the numbers globally keep rising. We have the number of cases, the incidence rate growing globally. And the fact that we still do not have a vaccine anywhere to take care of COVID-19 means that we'll continue to have a rise. And I was discussing something earlier on, talking about health communication and how people respond to health information. Now, the worry is that if we don't communicate properly, if we don't marry our communication with the sociocultural parameters present in every country, particularly for us in Nigeria here, we will be speaking above the head of our audience. So if people regard COVID-19, there's all kinds of myths that have been in the air in Nigeria here. In fact, I remember the 5G link with COVID-19 was rife, not only in Nigeria, globally. And so if all those, something as strange as 5G technology correlating with incidence of COVID-19. So you can understand how health, the challenge of communicating health messages could be for public health practitioners and doctors in general. And therefore, we've seen a rise in social gathering. The government itself has tried to relax as much as possible. Schools are open, borders are open, churches are open. And this all provide, I think a couple of weeks ago, we also saw people gathering for one reason or the other against the state. And protocols for COVID-19 were almost completely ignored. And I think there was also a concern raised by the chairman of the NCDC then, and even the minister, that we should expect a spike in 2 weeks thereabouts. But the concern we have now is that the number of testing that we have is not just commensurate with the risk of COVID-19 that we have. The risk of COVID-19 is high because we don't follow C19 protocols here as much as we should. And even in countries where they seem to be cooperating with the authorities, we have seen that second wave of COVID-19 has already set in. And the idea is that we want to see how we can promote economic activities and grow the economy. Nigeria, for instance, is almost said that perhaps we'll be heading for recession. So these are genuine concerns, but they will remain worry for us because as long as people do not observe COVID-19 protocols, it will be a concern. And your question about lessons learned from 2020 with regards to our health, our approach as a government, as a country to health indices and then health budgeting and expenditure. I can't truly say that we've learned much so far based on the figures that are staring us. We saw as a people, so on the part of the people, we saw pictures of health facilities that were vandalized. It seems to me that perhaps people do not understand the social nature of health. And vandalizing health facilities, who is losing? Is it the people or the government? Then we saw on the part of the government itself, we've seen how they've communicated COVID-19 and the budgeting. Since COVID-19 in Nigeria, we've seen doctors go on strike maybe 2 times. We've seen allied health workers go on strike at least once, threatening to go on strike. So does it show that all parties, all stakeholders to COVID-19, we are learning in this country? It is not obvious. So these are genuine concerns for everyone as we move into 2021.
All right. I want to ask you quickly your take on the alleged vaccine that has been developed by Russia, even though WHO has not approved it. What is your thinking? Is there maybe too much protocol being put in front of us actually having a vaccine? Because a lot of work has been expended towards getting one.
Well, so vaccine, the primary way vaccine works is that someone who is not exposed yet to a particular disease, a vaccine is produced and administered to the person such that there's some form of immunity developed in that person. And when the person is now faced with the disease itself, the person has already been exposed to something mild to which the body has developed immunity. So the body is seeing that disease second time and is not responding to it the first time. So the body can then fight and overcome that disease. That's how, that's just the basic way vaccines work. And to get to that, because vaccine, there are a number of ways you produce vaccine. So don't let me go into those details. But at the end of the day, you are administering something that would develop immunity in people. Because of the way it works, there are genuine concerns to giving approvals to vaccines. And I can understand, besides the politics that may be involved, that protocols for production of vaccine and mass production of vaccine and use of vaccine must be adhered to. So it's commendable that we have vaccines at the moment. The general belief is that we will not have it in commercial quantities until perhaps the first quarter of 2021. So we have to follow through that process. As much as we want to hasten and speed up, we just need to ensure that safety is of concern, not just only efficacy. So we have to bear this in mind. And for us, I think WHO is also trying to raise funds so that third world countries can also benefit, because I can imagine the cost of the vaccines when eventually they are available. So therefore, WHO is raising funds to ensure that we can have it in abundance when the C19 vaccines are eventually mass produced for the world.
All right, we'll take that same question to Dr. Olajide. Could you quickly speak on it? Because aside from Russia, we know that some persons have come up to say that we have reached an advanced stage, enough for the world to accept that there is a vaccine. The case in point we're talking about now is Russia. What's your 2 cents on that conversation?
Well, thank you for the question. Just like my colleague and friend said about that, international politics, you really can't meddle in it if you don't know much about it. There's a protocol before vaccines are released out to the public. Even in times of trial, When they are tied, there's a protocol for it, for that to occur, that process. And for you to release it out to the public, there's also a protocol. If it doesn't meet up with what WHO defines as being ready, then they will definitely go against it. Who funds them? Who funds the WHO? You know, those are questions you and I cannot really answer. Okay? You and I saying what the pathway in which Russia has followed, is it legal? Well, we can't really say much about that. So I think that's left for international organizations to decide if it's worth it. But I know that Russia has a duty to protect our citizens. So they will do the right thing for their citizens. And whatever is right for their citizens may be right for other people's citizens, if their government permits so. I think that's just the simple politics about it.
All right.
Thank you.
I think that's most of the time that we have this morning. Dr. Tunde Balogun and, of course, Dr. Ayodeji Olajide. Thank you both for speaking with us this morning.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. It was a pleasure.
Dr. Balogun, bye-bye.
Okay, why?
Have a good day. Now. We hope to speak to you soon. Yeah, just to say quickly that a lot of skepticism, the world has seen so much untruth from, bodies and organizations. So the ones that are saddled with the responsibility of confirming has a huge task not to make a mistake. And that's what I think the WHO is actually doing. They're trying to cross all their T's and dot all their I's. But a lot of countries, in Israel, for instance, I understand, has begun human trials of the COVID-19 vaccine. We know that even America, there is one that they are, FDA has come up to say it's a possible cure or a mitigation of an elongation of the time that people stay to get a cure. But we are hopeful. I am optimistic that we will get through this as well. And it's imperative, like the doctors have stressed, that people should remember we still have a pandemic on our hands. So the use of face mask is not for fashion. You see people put it on and it's under their nose or under their chin. It's supposed to cover your nose and your mouth, please. This is a social responsibility thing that we must reiterate. Wear your mask, proper hand hygiene, and hopefully we can stay away from getting the virus.
I'm also, going to quickly share that I feel that we also need to move away from, because when you asked about the Russian vaccine, and he mentioned international politics, I hope that we can also, or they can also understand that, lives need to be saved, before politics is played, then people need to be alive.
I agree.
And I'm also really concerned about what we're truly learning from this. If we have our health budget for, Nigeria's health budget for 2021, and it doesn't seem very different from, what we've been having in the past, and it doesn't seem like we've understood the need to invest more and to fund our healthcare better. We need to, in every way, do better, because we've seen, maybe we would say luckily for Nigeria, it hasn't been as bad as it is in even South Africa and other countries. But we've seen the need to invest more in healthcare at a time like this. We've seen the need to put in more work, with regards to doctors are still running out of Nigeria in waves.
Yeah, aside from the government, something you said earlier, I think, the current, the earlier situation we had with the protest also has raised the lack of, understanding among Nigerians that they too have a responsibility to safeguard what little infrastructure we had. I mean, I do not understand the looting of hospitals where people are to be treated. So it's not just government.
In a situation where there's a protest and there's rioting and there's almost anarchy, you don't select what you loot and you don't loot. It's
quite
so
unfortunate that we have a protest.
I'm not going to blame the people and say, oh, you should have touched here but don't touch here. No, it's chaos, and that's everyone is going to be a victim of that chaos. I'm going to go back.
We're still human beings, even when we're angry.
For me, it doesn't matter.
And then you can loot something else, but the same facility that will take care of you when you were sick,
the same
you
way,
go there and destroy. What happens to you when you fall sick?
It is the same way I'm not going going to say, oh, it's okay that you looted this person's shop, but you left the hospital. Every person who suffered from the violence and from the looting maybe didn't deserve it. I'm going to always go back and say the government should have done better to protect life and property. The government who put a curfew in place should have done better to ensure that there was enough security during a curfew.
That does not take away our responsibility as a people. I was having this conversation and somebody was saying that, Felicity, you sound naive when you say that. No, we are human beings first, Felicity, before we have emotions taking over. So if you destroy what we have, it is still us that will pay taxes. It is still us that will rebuild this outfits that we're destroying. It is still us that will suffer the increase in insecurity.
We'll spend more time on this, but there's a reason there is that many people who are jobless and do not care about these infrastructure. There's a reason there's millions of people who are angry enough to not care when they're destroying a hospital.
I see your point.
When they're destroying government infrastructure. There is a reason. So I'm always going to go back to that reason. I'm not going to blame that poor man who got frustrated and has lost someone to police brutality. Let's also not forget that...
We're being told to end this. I was more concerned about the health aspect.
There's no, oh, you can destroy a police station but don't destroy a hospital. There's nothing like that. Or you can destroy, these people's businesses but don't destroy a hospital. Doesn't make sense to me.
All right, we agree to disagree on this one.
Always.
We'll go on a short break, and when we come back, more unbundling. We'll be having a live studio guest and more guests to talk on the issues away from our opinions.
Stay with us.
It is engagement we need to have.
Those who suffer miscarriages are never taken into account.
Members of the National Assembly are also influence peddlers.
You are sitting on Nigerians' money.
From the barbing, I pay my rent. From the barbing, I send my children to school.
A consultative engagement.
No any tangible notification before they ban us.
It's one thing for people to be at your back and the heat of the moment, and another thing for them to still be with you when push comes to shove.
I will do everything to take Lagos out of the national grid.
The power of the people is stronger than the people in power.
True power is in the voting.
I'm afraid that these recent events have exposed the current government as out of touch with the people, and their moral right to rule has been eroded.
If Nigeria looks to be dying and we're the ones burying it, what we need to do quickly is to admit that our young people are the ones who will take Nigeria to the future.
If you engage the youth meaningfully, create opportunities for them to be employed, self-employed, and employ other people, you won't have to share 10,000, 50,000 naira to anybody.
As leaders, they have displayed a total lack of empathy and accountability in governance.
We operate a big local government where the president is the local government chairman.
It is engagement we need to have.
Those who suffer miscarriages are never taken into account.
Members of the National Assembly are also influence peddlers.
You are sitting on Nigerians' money.
From the barbing, I pay my rent. On the barbing, I send my children to school.
A consultative engagement.
No any tangible notification before they ban us.
It's one thing for people to be at your back and the heat of the moment, and another thing for them to still be with you when push comes to shove.
I will do everything to take Lagos out of the national grid.
What we do not understand, we will stigmatize.
What you can see is the remaining of the tanker that exploded.
He suffered equally confessed.
A 500 naira they collect them. If you no talk, then go beat you. Now 2,500 when they pay.
A lot of the jobs that exist today will not exist in the next 10 years.
When I see people today shouting, we're not too young to run, we are ready to run. Ready to run to where?
The people of excellence are, to a certain extent, being held ransom by idiots and bandits.
Once you are in government, you believe everything you do is right. And once you are in opposition, everything the government does is wrong.
And so it's time for us to take over power.
We can't talk about education reform if we don't decolonize our education system.
What we do not understand, we will stigmatize. Because it's just cultural. And I think it's just human nature.
They stop paying us salary. I don't like remembering it.
I am angry at Nigeria. I'm angry at this government which seems to be letting us down. I'm angry at us as a people.
In the process of struggling to free myself from his hand, he tore my pants and he raped me.
Yes, I commit offense truly.
Young girl, do you know where you are going? I say, I'm going to America. I say, oh. Now so that they talk, you are going to Libya. Which America?
As it then do mark our place, some people they die now.
This is Plus TV Africa. Big stories live here.
Still is The Breakfast here on Plus TV Africa. And of course, continuing with our conversations this morning, the federal government says it has no intention of shutting down social media, but it will regulate the platforms. It said its plan is to regulate social media to be responsible and refrain from being a purveyor of fake news and hate speech. The Minister of Information and Culture, Lai Mohammed, stated this when he inspected the headquarters of the Nation newspaper and TV Continental that were attacked in the aftermath of the End SARS protest. Speaking at the premises of the Nation, the minister said Muhammadu Buhari, the president, and his administration has high regards for freedom of the press. The government's earlier announcement to regulate social media was met with criticism. He said his recent call for the regulation of the excesses of social media should not be misconstrued for a total ban. And of course, joining us to have a quick conversation about this is Libros Oshoma, a legal practitioner who joins us here in the studio, and Mr. Tony Usidame, a public relations expert. Thank you both for joining us. Good morning, Tony.
And me?
Thank you for joining us.
All right, I'll start with you, Mr. Oshoma. Let me get a quick quote from what the minister said. He said, we must regulate social media in a manner that it does not become a purveyor of fake news and hate speech, end quote. What do you understand by this particular statement? If you can break it down for us, considering the fluid nature of information on social media.
Yeah, I think the minister is either delusional or he does not understand what regulation means, in this, digital age. I say this. These were statements made, when he inspected a Nation newspaper that was burnt by protesters. And the implication is that it was social media, fake news, that led to that action. The government is still living in denial. It's living in denial. Who will regulate government's activities and lack of humanity? There is a reason and purpose for government. We should understand it from that point of view first. Government itself created these people they are calling miscreants and thugs today. The protest did not start on the day these places were burnt. It started long before then. And so, when government does not have the right attitude or panacea to ameliorate a problem, they use that same old method that they are used to, that the Minister for Transportation, Amechi, talked about: deploy soldiers, deploy police. And then you escalate the issue. Rather than accept that responsibility, that it was your insensitivity that escalated this issue, you're looking for who to blame. Oh, social media created this. Why, if it is social media, why are they blaming, why are they fining television houses? You respect the media, but yet you're fining television houses for beaming a protest that you accepted was peaceful. It's contradictory. And that's why, for me, the government needs to understand that when you own up to your responsibility, you won't have this kind of breakdown of law and order. Social media can be regulated. But, to whom much is given, much is expected. If government regulates its own activity and its own way of dealing with its people, naturally, social media itself will be regulated.
That's the part where clarity is needed. Let me come to Mr. Tony Usidame. The part about the definition of regulation, because we know that these platforms, Google, Twitter, Facebook, all have self-regulatory mechanism, right? So when he talks about regulating, we also have something about the social media bill that's still controversial. So please, can you help us understand regulating in the context that Mr. Lai Mohammed is insisting?
Okay, thank you for that question. But, just before I answer, let me quickly buttress something that Mr. Liberos just said. The fact that the looting and wanton destruction of private public property that we saw was not carried out by the peaceful protesters. This was carried out by unscrupulous elements in the society that you can't join with the peaceful or legitimate aspirations of the NSAS protesters. I thought it was important to make that distinction, because the narrative you see being pushed by public officials and also most media is that it is the NSAS protesters themselves that were carrying out this destruction and looting. So we need to make a distinction between both events. Now, social media, back to social media and regulation, I agree that some form of regulation is necessary, as well as the enforcement of existing legislation. However, as in every true democracy, based on the free speech principle,
the power of the state to limit or impose civility and security restrictions on public discourse is very, very, very limited. And so the responsibility of moderating and regulating the social media space falls on intermediaries such as the social media companies themselves. This is what obtains in democracies around the world, because government cannot be seen to be guiding the public space, which is a tool for progress. When you have divergent views, when you have dissenting views about issues, it is this healthy debates that form or propels society forward. But it is not the place of government, based on the constitutional rights of citizens to free speech and freedom of expression. That duty falls on the social media companies. And as you rightly said, they are stepping up to this responsibility. Facebook, Twitter, all have rules that guide the community, that guide relationships in the community. When people post stuff nowadays, Facebook, Twitter, and all the other social medias are quick to flag them once they have confirmed that they are illegal materials of already existing legislation. There are also legislation guiding the activities of the traditional media, some of which
between that
people under sedition, arrest the person, and then everybody's pleading with you to let go. Tony said there are existing laws. So how much of those existing laws, like libel, have we used as the government used to charge some of these people you perceive are fanning the embers of misinformation, or that you have libeled somebody or maybe a government official? We've seen situations where somebody carried, just in the last election in Edo, somebody alleged that an INEC official went to the governor's house to receive money. He sued. The matter is in court as I speak in Edo State. He went to court. That information was carried through social media. He issued, a report to that effect. The man went to court to say, you have libeled me. The matter is currently before the court. And so, what government, because Alhaji Lai Mohammed White's in opposition, he knew the importance of, fake news and rumor. There was a time Alhaji Lai Mohammed alleged that the government, of the day at that time were trying to kill him. Obasanjo even wrote a letter and said that the government was training snipers. And then El-Rufai said he was the first target. Amechi said he was the second target. They started listing themselves. So they understood the importance of the fake news that they used to ride to government. And so it's like it's coming, they're scared that this same thing can be used against them. And so they sit down. Anytime there is an agitation, anytime there's criticism, anytime there's confrontation, the first thing, rather than address the issues, why are people, angry? People are saying there's hunger in the land. Truly, is there hunger in the land? How do we address it? Because if you indeed address it, then there won't be hunger. So nobody will be crying there's hunger when there is, food. Rather than address those things, you say, no. I think it's because they have access to information. It's because they have access to social media. So that is why you can just wake up and do a video of what is happening. Eyewitness reports. Even television these days, newspapers rely on eyewitness report. Even the government is attempting to also use social media, even though they are doing catch up. So rather than sit back and actually understand, so you see, oh yes, fake news regulation bill. Tony talked about, how other countries have been able to regulate this. What do they do? Simple. You meet with the service providers. And the service providers don't even need Nigerian government to meet with them because, in other society, they understand the import of, carrying fake news. And so what they do, they also verify at their end to say these are fake news. If you remember quickly, BBC, during the NSAS protest, did a chronological analysis of all of the photographs and in some cases, videos that were used to portray events that were previous events. Not because the Nigerian government said so, but because they understand the responsibility of modern media practice. The same thing, I don't think you will post a video on TV now without verifying the source. Because you also understand the responsibility. So you don't need Nigerian government to come breathe down your neck. So what Nigerian government should be doing is, if you give good governance, you would have reduced the hatred from the people who are supposed to love you.
Do you think that we stand, there is so much danger with regards inciting violence from social media, the way that it is being portrayed? Because if you watch the videos from the Minister of Information, Lai Mohammed, he makes it look like we are almost going to be facing another pandemic as bad as COVID-19 from social media.
No. He cited quickly. He cited the case of Rwanda. 1,000 people died, but he misrepresented the fact of that case. Because the matter went to court. At the Nuremberg Tribunal, 3 media houses owners were charged and sentenced to jail. What happened was because they incited specifically. They started, what they did with that, how they found the embers of that carnage was the fact that they started listing the names of members of Tutsis leaders, and then they started giving their addresses using their platform. So what they were doing was inciting the people against some specific persons, and so the people would go to these houses and burn them. Oh yes, this person is a Tutsis, and he did this. This is where he lived. This was what he had done before. Yes, that's why I say it's a two-way traffic. The first thing should be government, the people that are angry, why are they angry? These miscreants, these hoodlums that you call hoodlums and thugs, what was this the generation, the Nigeria handed over to you by, the founding fathers? Was this the Nigeria that you promised? How do we ensure that we reduce the army of unemployed youth so that even if you want to foment trouble, you will not have this number of people? Why did the former president decide to create Almajiri School? Because they understand the import of education. Why did Chief Obafemi Awolowo decide to give free education in the West? Because they understand the importance of education to, a citizen. But in the absence of all of that, you're going to have an army of unemployed, uneducated people.
All right, let's bring
once you light a match, you won't determine the extent of the damage.
All right, Mr. Usidame, I want to come back to you now. The comments by the Minister of Information didn't just narrow itself to social media. He did say something along the lines of the government will continue to support responsible journalism. There were allusions that the media, as a conventional body, also did not do what they were supposed to do. And there is this message, especially when it comes to the recent coverage of the EndSARS protests, there was allusion, messages being shared on social media referring to a particular reportage that turned out to be wrong about snipers at some hotel that were there to shoot at the EndSARS protesters. So my question is, from all that you have observed as a public relations expert, would you say that the media was not responsible enough when it came to the reportage of the EndSARS protests? Let's just take that as a case study.
Okay. First and foremost, as you know, the media is a very, very important tool for democracy, because the media gives a voice. I'm talking about the media generally, including traditional and, of course, the digital media, gives a voice to the voiceless, people who ordinarily would not have been heard. The social media era has made that characteristic or attribute of the media even more important, because now with a simple phone and data, somebody that would not have made it to the news, for instance, on Plus TV Africa, can actually air their views about a certain, issue that affects them, just as we use the social media to mobilize for the SARS campaign. So the media, of course, has to be recognized as one of the of democracy, and an important one at that, where every citizen can have their voices heard. Yes, I agree, as I said before, that some form of regulation is necessary. And I look at this in this way, that there are 3 levels of safeguard. The first is the government.
Okay, Mr. Sitame, not to interrupt you, I wanted you to speak specifically on conventional media, because he also talked about supporting responsible journalism. And the question is, do you think that the reportage, the way this NSAS protest was captured by mainstream media, there was some level of irresponsibility?
Yeah, I mean, personally, from where I am sitting, and this is just my opinion, I think the media did a fantastic job of covering this NSAS protest as it should. That is not to say that certain half-truths or misinformation didn't, slip in at some point somewhere. And like Mr. Libero said, some media houses have come to correct some of this misinformation that was being shared. But generally, the media has been seen to have done its duty to the people, its duty to the society, its duty to promoting democracy in the country by airing this protest, which I said is a legitimate protest. Now, the freedom that the Constitution guarantees citizens, that's a freedom to the right to free speech and freedom of expression, also imposes on them the responsibility for what they share. So while we're saying government has no business looking for additional regulations for the social media space, we're also saying that as citizens, we also have a responsibility to play. Remember that the social media companies themselves need time to verify whatever news is being put out there. Some countries that have added additional regulations, say 24 to 4.
Okay, I think
news items that are deemed to be illegal are removed. Else, the companies face fines. In Germany, in 2018, they instituted a bill called the NetzDG bill, which imposes on social media companies a fine of 50 million euros if news items that are found to be fake are not removed. Russia had something similar some years earlier in 2015. But I don't want to go into.
All right. We have to be patient with the network.
He's still hanging in there. So I'm gonna, we'll probably have to, take a break with him there and then go back to Libero Soshoma. I want, you to also speak with regards, if there truly are genuine fears of the dangers of social media that we should not also ignore, even if a lot of people are speaking against regulation and control. If you look at, some things that have happened in the North, a couple of years ago, look at also the reactions to the Charlie Hebdo cartoons, that eventually led to about the killing of 12 of their staff and riots, in different parts of the world. What ways can we, or can the Nigerian government also control, that type of incident here in Nigeria?
Yeah.
And is that also one of the things that, the current administration might be trying to save us from?
No, that's not what they are trying to save us from. I agree that every society, there's nothing like a free society in the world. Where your rights stops, that's where mine begins. Where the government's rights stops, that's where ours begin. Where ours stop, that's where government's right. And so the essence of having a government is to, regulate and control. While they are regulating, they also need to regulate themselves. And that's why we say, you must also learn to control those that are controlling you. So it's a two-way traffic. And so, yes, I agree. there's need for some form of regulation. But before I go there, I want to quickly, say something that the reportage that Felicity spoke about sniper and all of that. Also, the bank admitted that they actually had people on top of that building, but that what they were doing was different from what was reported. And so the conventional media didn't just report what didn't happen. They probably would have misrepresented what those people were doing there.
And that was the danger.
But also, there's need to further investigate if truly, because now in Nigeria, anything can happen. Yes, truly. You don't just say because the bank has said. There's also a need for, I would have expected a need for, an independent verification of the fact whether it was actually, people repairing the mast or whether it was as was reported. I'm not trying to hold brief for anybody. And also, to now correct some of these things, the first thing is, to whom much is given, much is expected. Government should first and foremost be responsible and responsive. He who comes to equity must come with clean hands. And so, the Metasine issues in the north wasn't caused by social media. The riot you're talking about the cartoon wasn't caused by social media. It was even in newspapers, conventional. And so, we have been having uprising in Nigeria. We have been having demonstrations. And government had consistently used force rather than persuasion to quell such protests. And it wasn't social media that gave rise to those protests. And secondly also, you notice that there was a twist that social media introduced to this protest. Now, because most of the people who ordinarily would have used force now know that videos will go out there. Some of them, thanks to them and kudos to them, deploy professionalism to appeal to the sense of emotions and feelings of these protesters. And you saw them at the end of the day, they dispersed. So, for me, that's the first responsibility of government. Before you regulate, there are existing laws. How much of those laws have we used, judiciously to ensure that you win the trust? So give a fair assessment and a balance to the fact that, yes, government is fair in this. And do you know what is creating all of this? Because government had never been fair. And so in a situation where you are not fair, you create, the moment anything you do, you raise suspicion.
Your position is always, once we get governance right, we'll get a lot more.
Once you get governance right,
all right, let's bring in.
You won't have this army of young people.
All right, we're
you
almost
won't have
out of time.
opportunities.
Let's bring in Mr.